Hello, hello. Welcome back. Excellent to have you back. And a timely moment for your arrival as we are going to kick off, I think, what will be the final chapters of The Land of Stories, The Wishing Spell. Let's see. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot left. I think we can make it through tonight, don't you? Let's give it a try. So, Chapter 23, A Royal Invitation. Alex and Connor were both given their own chambers in the palace. It had been the first time since their stay at the Shoe Inn that they had slept in a bed, and it was the first night since they had arrived in the Land of Stories that they had gotten a full night's rest. They were so exhausted that they slept until mid-afternoon the next day. It was strange for them to sleep apart from each other. Alex and Connor both woke up every hour or so, each looking for the other, and they had to remind themselves where they were and that they were finally safe. The palace servants had taken their t-shirts and jeans to wash, and the twins were given clothes to wear in the meantime. Alex was given a beautiful scarlet dress with fur around the cuffs and neck. Connor, against his will, wore a button-up shirt with a collar far too ruffled for his taste, and a pair of bloomers. For the first time in 2 weeks, they were dressed like they belonged there. The entire palace had been buzzing with the news of Goldilocks' escape and Jack's disappearance. The twins couldn't help but smile behind the backs of the frantic soldiers as they passed in the halls. They knew that wherever Jack and Goldilocks were, they were together. The twins offered to go meet the fairy godmother with Froggy, but he wouldn't allow it just yet. After the journey you've had, I insist you stay a day or two and catch your breath, Froggy said. And so they stayed for the next couple of days. They ate every meal with Queen Snow White and King Chandler in the massive dining hall. Snow White told the twins amazing stories as they ate about growing up in the palace, living with the dwarfs, and the different reactions she'd encountered when people had thought she had come back from the dead. Snow White invited the 7 dwarfs over for dinner one night. The twins had wondered why one half of the table in the dining hall was significantly lower than the other, until the dwarfs marched in and took their places around it. Alex and Connor laughed and laughed until their stomachs hurt at the stories they told. Connor beat all 7 of the dwarfs and Froggy in a game of cards and took all their gold coins. It was the most fun the twins had had since they'd arrived in the fairy tale world, but things became awkward once Connor asked King Chandler, "Why were you so interested in a dead girl anyway?" The twins spent their days in the enormous palace library. Alex scanned through every book on every shelf, looking for anything that could put them on a path to finding a new way home. It took her 3 days to go through all the books, but she found nothing. Connor watched her from a sofa every day while enjoying dessert after dessert from the kitchen. "I think it's time we left this place," Alex told Connor. "You want to leave?" Connor asked. "Why? This place is great." "I don't want to overstay our welcome," Alex said. "We're not going to find a way home sitting around a palace. Froggy said he would help us look. The sooner we start, the sooner we'll be home. Besides, despite what she may do to us, we promised Froggy we would let him take us to the fairy godmother. Maybe if she isn't too mad at us for breaking the glass slipper, she could give us a tip on how to get home." "I guess," Connor said, sorrowfully looking down at the cake he was enjoying. His eyes suddenly lit up. "You know, there's something we haven't tried." "What's that?" Alex asked. He stood up, closed his eyes, and began knocking his heels together. "There's no place like home. There's no place like home," Connor shouted. He opened one eye and was disappointed to see that he was still in the same place. "Just thought I'd try it." The next day the twins packed up all their things and dressed in their own clothes. They tossed the saber from the deepest sea into the fireplace of Alex's room, destroying it, just as they had promised the Seafoam spirit. They had just arranged to leave with Froggy afternoon that day, when Sir Grant found them with some news. "We've received a message for you," Sir Grant said. Curious, the twins quickly followed him to the dining room, where Snow White, Red Riding Hood, and Froggy stood around excitedly. The queens were each holding bright envelopes. a messenger from another kingdom, blew his horn upon seeing the twins and presented them with an identical envelope. Cinderella had her baby, Snow White told the twins. It's a girl. The twins eagerly opened the envelope. It was white and addressed to Alex and Connor Wishington. A gold wax seal on the back was in the shape of a glass slipper. The invitation said, His Highness King Chance Charming and Her Royal Majesty Queen Cinderella cordially invite you to an exclusive celebration of the birth of their child, the unnamed princess, at their palace tomorrow afternoon. How wonderful, Alex said. But why are we invited? Beats me, Connor said. Maybe she needs babysitters. I wasn't expected to be invited either, Red said. Elected queens are usually left out. So you're usually left out? Connor asked. Red turned the same shade as her coat and didn't answer. Are we going to go? Connor asked. Do you honestly think I'm going to miss this? Alex asked. Besides, we should return the glass slipper and the pieces of the other one to Cinderella. It's the right thing to do. What about Froggy? Connor asked. Froggy made a gesture like he was calming a fire. Oh, don't worry about me, Froggy said. I wasn't personally invited, so I don't want to intrude. I've never cared too much for the Charming Kingdom anyway. Nonsense, Red said. You'll come as my guest, and I won't hear any more of it. She held her head high. Froggy knew he wasn't getting out of this one. We'll go see the baby princess, and then we'll find the fairy godmother and Froggy afterward, Alex decided. Hopefully she'll still turn you back into a human. You mean you're going to become human? Red asked with a hand over her chest. Yes, Froggy said. Long story. Why didn't you just say so? Red said. You have no idea how this changes how I feel about you. Although I must say I am very proud of myself for being friendly to whatever it is that you are now. If Froggy had eyebrows, they would have both been raised. Come with me right now, Red said, and linked his arm in hers. Let's go plan our outfits for tomorrow. She led Froggy out of the room. He looked back at the twins, his eyes saying, Help! But they were too busy holding in laughs to rescue him. By that afternoon, the carriages were loaded and the journey into the Charming Kingdom began. Snow White and King Chandler rode in one carriage and the twins rode in the other with Froggy and Red. They were surrounded by a fleet of soldiers the entire way. Now this is the way to travel, Connor said. The twins kept pointing out familiar land they had traveled across during their journey. It inspired them to tell Froggy and Red about all the adventures they had had. The Frogman and the Queen were all ears. Froggy croaked a couple times during the twins' animated retellings, especially during the part about the trolls and goblins. Given their audience, they left out the part about sneaking into Red's castle and being partially responsible for the fire. The twins kept stopping each other to say, "We can never tell Mom about this part," when they got to the most dangerous moments of their trip. The carriages traveled through the night and arrived at Cinderella's palace the following afternoon. Rose petals filled the air, and bells rang from afar as the entire kingdom celebrated the birth of their future ruler. Froggy started acting very strange as soon as they arrived. He was shaky with nerves. The palace made him anxious for some reason. The group climbed the never-ending steps to the front entrance and was escorted down the red-carpeted hall into the ballroom. The ballroom was virtually empty and seemed much bigger when not filled with people dancing. Cinderella was sitting on her throne, cradling her newborn daughter. Sitting around her in a big circle, some in chairs and some on the floor, were Sleeping Beauty, Rapunzel, and members of the Fairy Council. Sleeping Beauty's and Rapunzel's husbands congratulated King Chance in the corner of the room. "What are you going to name her?" Rapunzel asked. She was beautiful, with hair that matched the lock Alex and Connor had collected for the wishing spell. She wore it in the biggest bun the twins had ever seen, and it still ran down her back and trailed behind her. "I can't decide," Cinderella said. "You should name her after her Aunt Rapunzel," Rapunzel suggested, and everyone laughed. "I love you, Rapunzel, but I love my daughter too much to ever do that to her," Cinderella said, and everyone laughed even harder. "Look who's here," Cinderella said as soon as she looked up and saw the group walking towards them. Everyone was happy to see Snow White and Chandler, but the room grew very tense when they saw Alex and Connor walking in behind them with a giant frogman. Everyone looked at them uncomfortably as if they were naked. "Aren't those the twins who stole the glass slipper?" King Chance said, stepping forward from the clump of kings. No, we tried telling you. It wasn't us, said Alex, panicked, afraid history was about to repeat itself and she and her brother would be chased by guards. Everyone relax, Cinderella laughed. No one stole anything. I invited them here. My fairy godmother wanted to have a word with them. What does she want with them, dear? King Chance asked his wife. I'm not sure, Cinderella said. Alex and Connor exchanged looks of dread. This must be even more serious than the broken slipper. We may have accidentally broken one of your shoes, Alex said. Connor had never seen her look so ashamed. It wasn't really our fault, Connor said. I mean, it was, but it was a really complicated situation and would never have happened unless it absolutely had to. Oh, that's no trouble at all, Cinderella said. I can't tell you how many times I've broken them myself. The fairy godmother always fixes them when she visits. That's probably all she wants. She'll be here soon. The twins sighed with such relief that they shrank a few inches. Connor patted his sister on the shoulder, as he knew she had been stressing about it. If there was ever a group of people she wanted to leave a good impression with, it was this one. Snow White, Red, Alex, and Connor joined the women huddled around the baby. King Chandler dragged Froggy over to where the men in the corner were and introduced them to him. Froggy awkwardly shook their hands. He was the first frogman ever to be inside the palace. Look at her, Snow White said, looking down at the baby princess. She's beautiful. She looks just like you, Cinderella said. She looks just like you, Cinderella, Red said. I was a beautiful baby myself. The princess was indeed beautiful. She was only a few days old, but looked just like her mother, with auburn hair and bright eyes. I'm so glad to see you two are all right, Sleeping Beauty said to the twins. Did everything work out for you? She winked at them. The twins looked down at their feet. Not so great, unfortunately, Alex said. She reached into her bag and pulled out the spindle. Thanks for letting us borrow this, though. My pleasure, Sleeping Beauty said, and took the spindle from her. And Connor, I have to thank you for your... What did you call it again? Oh yes, the rubber band trick. We've been trying it on a few citizens, and it appears to be helping quite a bit. Connor was beaming. I told you so, he said, a rare thing for him to say. Snow White, I heard they finally found your stepmother, Cinderella said. Congratulations. That must be such a relief. The other queens and fairies added their congratulations on this subject. However, Snow White didn't seem happy about it. Is everything all right, Snow? Sleeping Beauty asked. Yes, of course, Snow White said. It's all very bittersweet. Bittersweet? Emeralda asked. It's a long story, Cinderella said. Wonderful. I love stories, Rapunzel said, and made herself more comfortable sitting on the floor. Snow White looked at the twins. They smiled very supportively at her, encouraging her to tell the others everything that they already knew. Snow White told the queens and the fairies about her stepmother's past. She explained to them about the enchantress taking her away from her family, how her fiancé was cursed into the mirror, and about the heart of stone. She left out the part about helping her escape, however, because just as the twins had kept details from Red Riding Hood, Snow White knew her audience. Many of the women looked as if they were on the verge of tears. Some held their hands over their mouths. Others just shook their heads in disbelief. I can't believe it, Rosette said. That's the saddest story I've ever heard, said Coral, petting the walking fish, who rested peacefully in her lap. And even when the whole world hated her, she still never quit trying to free the man she loved, Sleeping Beauty said. She never gave up hope, Skylene said. Cinderella sat up straight in her throne. Hope! That's it, she said, looking down at her daughter. That's what I'm going to name her. Princess Hope Charming, the future queen. It's beautiful, King Chance said, and kissed his newborn daughter on the forehead. Everyone awed and clapped their approval. Then I believe it's time we christened Princess Hope with new gifts, Emeralda said, and gestured to the fairies to get on their feet. One by one, the fairies each blessed the princess with a christening spell. They gave her gifts of wisdom and health, of compassion and wealth, of pride and discipline, and lastly of beauty, although she already had plenty to spare. Would you like to hold her? Cinderella asked Alex. Me? Alex asked, pointing to herself. Yes, I would be honored. Cinderella gently placed her daughter into Alex's arms. Alex wondered if the baby had any idea where or who it was. Did she know how special she was already just by having been born? Did she know she was a future queen of a kingdom in the land of stories? The baby yawned. Perhaps she did know and was just exhausted thinking about it. The doors of the ballroom opened, and the twins saw a familiar face coming toward them. It was Sir Lambton, and he had an enormous grin on his face. "Your Majesty, the fairy godmother has arrived," Sir Lambton said. "Oh, splendid, Lambton," Cinderella said. "Would you let her know where we are?" "Certainly, Your Highness," Lambton said. "But before she joins you, she would like to have a word with the children. Alone." All the heads in the room turned to Alex and Connor, who gulped in unison. "She's waiting in the clock tower," Lambton said. The twins slowly walked out of the ballroom with Lambton. He guided them through the palace, staircase after staircase, up to the clock tower. "It's great to see you two again," Lambton told the twins. "The fairy godmother has been looking for you two for quite some time now." "That can't be good," Connor said. Are we in trouble?" Lambton didn't answer. The twins grew very worried by his silence. Alex pulled out the map and the journal from her bag along with the piece of the glass slipper. "If she's upset about something, we'll just explain ourselves from the very beginning," Alex said. "We haven't done anything wrong, have we?" "Of course not," Connor said. "Our intentions were always very good with everything we did. Right?" The twins and Lambton ran out of stairs to climb and found a round door that led them inside the clock tower. Lambton knocked lightly on the door. "Come in," said a voice from inside. "Here we go," Alex said to Connor. "Fingers crossed." Lambton led the twins inside. The clock tower was gigantic. The twins felt like they were on the inside of an enormous antique clock, as there were giant turning gears and mechanisms everywhere they looked. They could see the entire kingdom through the clock face. A short woman was standing with her back to the door, looking out over the kingdom. She wore a long, hooded, light blue overcoat that sparkled like the night sky. "I'll leave you alone now," Lambton said. He promptly shut the door behind him and left the twins alone with the fairy godmother. The twins cautiously tiptoed closer to the woman. "Excuse me?" Connor asked. "Miss Fairy Godmother? You wanted to see us?" The fairy godmother turned to face the children. She was a beautiful older woman with kind eyes and a radiant smile. Her hair was a light brown and was worn in a gorgeous hairdo. The twins froze. "Grandma?" Alex asked. Well, that's the end of chapter 23. Let's find out what's happening with Grandma in the very last chapter. 24. A Fairy's Tale. "I am so glad you're all right," their grandmother said, and rushed over the twins. She gave them the biggest and longest hug they had ever received from her. "Your mother and I have been so worried." The twins didn't hug her back. They couldn't. They could barely breathe. They were surprised they were still standing because neither of them could feel their legs. "How are you?" their grandma asked. "Are you hurt? Are you hungry? Do you need anything?" "Grandma," Alex asked softly, "is that really you?" "It's me, sweetheart," she said. "I'm really here." "You're the fairy godmother?" Connor asked. She smiled at them. "I am," she said, with sadness in her voice. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to find out this way." Their grandmother stopped speaking. Her gaze had landed on the object Alex was holding. "Good heavens, what on earth are you doing with your father's old journal?" she asked. Alex and Connor felt like they'd swallowed their own hearts. "This is Dad's journal?" Alex asked with big, bewildered eyes. "We've been following Dad's journal this whole time?" Connor asked. "I think I'm going to faint," Alex said. Their grandmother pulled out a long crystal wand from inside her overcoat. She waved it, and a sofa magically appeared in the clock tower. She took the twins by the hands and sat them down on the sofa and let them catch their breath. It took the twins by surprise. Even though she was the fairy godmother, Alex and Connor weren't expecting their grandmother to be capable of such magic. Grandma took the journal from Alex and flipped through the pages, amazed that it had somehow found its way into their possession. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "It was given to us by our friend Froggy," Alex said. "We've been following it since we got here." "We've been hunting down all the items for the wishing spell," Connor said. "The wishing spell?" their grandma asked anxiously. "No wonder it was impossible to find you." "You and Dad are actually from here then?" Alex asked. "I wasn't just making it all up in my head?" And Dad wrote that journal?" Connor asked, his mind still stuck on the subject. Yes, their grandmother said. "It's all true. I gave this journal to him when he was a boy. I'm glad it was useful." The twins had gotten used to their heads spinning with questions, but now they were spinning out of control. They didn't know which questions to ask first. "So Dad wanted the wishing spell so he could travel into our world?" Connor asked. "He wrote that he fell in love with a woman in our world," Alex said. Could it be your mother?" "Yes," their grandma said. Alex and Connor exchanged a look, each seeing how the other was processing the information. Neither looked less shocked than the other. "How long have you been a fairy godmother?" Alex asked. "Why didn't anyone tell us any of this?" Connor asked. "I know you probably have 100 questions," their grandma said, "but before you worry yourselves too much, let me explain." "Please," Connor said. Their grandma took a deep breath. She didn't know where or how to start. "We always planned on telling you when you were older," she said. "Your father was counting down the days until he could bring you here and show you around. Unfortunately, he never got a chance to. After he passed away, you two were going through so much already. Your mother and I didn't want to overwhelm you, so we decided to hold off." "So, wait, Mom knows about this place?" Alex asked. "She's never been here, but she knows enough," their grandma said. "Your father and I, on the other hand, were born and raised in this world. Before your father was born, and when I was just a young fairy in training, I accidentally discovered your world." "So, your cabin in the woods, your blue car, it was all just for show?" Connor asked. "Certainly not," Grandma said. "I stay at that cabin during my travels, and I love that blue car. I wish people in this world knew about automobiles." "So how did you end up in our world to begin with?" Alex asked. "It happened by total accident," she said. "I had recently just finished a tour of the kingdoms, traveling to those who needed a helping hand, and I was anxious to help more. I waved my wand around me, I closed my eyes and thought with all my heart, I wish to go someplace where people need me the most, thinking I would end up in a small village in the northern kingdom. When I opened my eyes, I knew I wasn't in the kingdoms anymore. I kept it to myself for years before telling any of the other fairies about it. I met a group of children there who showed me around. I was fascinated by their world, but they were even more fascinated with stories about mine. They didn't know anything about magic or fairies before I came along. Their world was so consumed with war and famine and disease, it was all they knew. They would sit for hours and listen to my stories about the world I came from. It seemed to take them away from all their troubles. I saw how the stories inspired them, how they gave them hope, how they gave them courage and strength, and how they learned lessons from them. It made children without families learn to love and trust a little more than they had before, and it put the sparkle back in the eyes of the children who were ill and had had their childhoods taken from them. I decided from then on that I would do as much as possible to make our stories, our history, as known as possible. To date, I am the only one who has had the gift to move between worlds, and I found it to be a great responsibility. I recruited Mother Goose and a few of the fairies to go with me into your world and spread these stories of ours. We found the children who needed to hear them the most, the ones who were down on their luck and needed a little magic, and the term fairy tales was born. Your world was moving so fast and growing so large, we couldn't possibly do it by ourselves anymore, so we asked people like the Brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen and a few others to help us over the years." "So there is a time difference," Alex said. "Your world moves so much faster than ours," Grandma said. "I visited once a week, and every time I returned, it seemed as if decades and decades had gone by." "That's why the stories have been in our world for so long," Connor said. "Oh no," Alex exclaimed. "Mom, does that mean she's grown into an old woman while we've been here?" "No," their grandmother said. "You see, children, there was a time difference, but then something truly magical happened that changed all of that." "What?" Connor said. "You two were born," Grandma said with a smile. The twins looked at each other amazed. "Why are we so special?" Connor asked. "Because sometimes magic has a mind of its own," she said. Grandma looked down at her hands and at her wedding ring. "Your grandfather loved you and your world and traveled with me whenever I went. He was the love of my life, but he unfortunately died shortly before your father was born. I raised your father here on my own, but I continued to visit the other world from time to time, although it was painful because it reminded me of your grandfather. Your father was always an adventurous boy. From an early age, he was constantly running off and exploring different lands throughout the kingdoms. He was always very curious about the other world, and I promised to take him one day when he was an adult. Many years later, he came with us to a children's hospital to read stories to the sick children. Your mother had just started nursing there, and I knew from the minute he laid eyes on her that his heart didn't belong to himself anymore. Naturally, I forbid him from staying or ever coming back with the fairies and myself again. It was selfish of me, but I was scared he would get lost in the time difference of the worlds and would live the rest of his life without me. I couldn't lose my son after losing your grandfather, but his love for your mother was too strong, and he found his own way back by using the wishing spell. I had no choice but to give him my blessing and let him go. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do as a mother. However, as soon as you two were born, the most peculiar thing happened. Your world and this world slowly started to move at similar speeds. It's the greatest magic I have seen in my lifetime. Being your father's children means that you have part of this world inside you. You always have. You two are the first children of both worlds. You're the bridge that connects them. The twins were so relieved to know that their mother would be the same age when they returned. You mean, Alex began to ask, but paused because it almost seemed too good to be true, that Connor and I are part fairy? I suppose so, if you put it that way, she said. Alex placed both of her hands over her heart, and tears came to her eyes. Connor rolled his eyes and sighed. That's wonderful, Alex said. Oh, great, Connor said sarcastically. The guys at school can never hear about this. How else did you think you set off my old storybook, Grandma said. Alex sat up in her seat. She remembered the night in bed when she was holding the land of stories and wishing with all her heart to travel inside it. The first night she discovered it wasn't an average book. You mean I did that? She asked. I made the land of stories bring us here. Yes, Grandma said. A proud smile filled her face. Alex couldn't believe it. She was magic. She'd made it happen. It all makes so much sense now, Alex said. In the castle, the evil queen was hiding in, my tear activated the wishing spell, and I saw my reflection in one of her magic mirrors. I had wings. I thought I was just seeing things. Evil queen, the grandma asked. It sounds like you two have had more of an adventure here than I thought. You can say that again, Connor said. I look forward to hearing all about it, the grandma said. Your mother has been worried sick. She's had to give your school every excuse known to man as to why you two have been gone. I think it's time I took you home. Home. She was going to take them home. Never had a word sounded so beautiful. Can you do that? Connor said. You'd be amazed at the things your grandma can do, she laughed, but her look faded as she sadly looked down at the journal that had belonged to her late son. Amazing, isn't it? Even in death, your father managed to show you around this place. It had always been his dream. Alex and Connor had always thought that their father was amazing, but until now they never knew just how amazing he actually was. The twins and their grandmother left the clock tower and caught Sir Lambton leaning on the door, closely listening to their conversation. He escorted them back downstairs to the ballroom. I knew your father, Lambton whispered into the twins' ears. We grew up together. I knew you must have been his children the very second I saw you. That's why I put the glass slipper in your bag. The twins couldn't even acknowledge it with a smile. Their minds were already overloaded. They walked into the ballroom, and everyone stood at the sight of the fairy godmother. Everyone, please, have a seat. I've come to bless the baby princess with a gift, and then I'm going to take my grandchildren home, she said, and put her arms around Alex and Connor. Grandchildren? Cinderella asked. I had no idea. Why, that practically makes us family, she said, smiling at the twins. Did you hear that, Alex? Connor said, leaning close to his sister. Cinderella herself just said we're practically her family. I know, Alex peeped, and I'm trying not to cry. The fairy godmother took the newborn princess into her arms. The twins were excited to see their grandmother in action. She's beautiful, dear, she said to Cinderella. My gift to the princess will be bravery. She may need it in the years to come. The fairy godmother kissed the newborn's cheek. Her lips left a sparkly mark on the infant's face, and it slowly faded away as the gift was absorbed. Before I go, I have one more gift to give, the fairy godmother said, and she took out her long crystal wand. Will the gentleman known as Froggy please come to the front of the room? Froggy, who had been partially hiding behind the charming kings, cautiously met the fairy godmother in the middle of the room. "Thank you so much for looking out for my grandchildren," the twins' grandmother said. "I will never be able to thank you enough, but for now, I'd like to take away the curse put on you." Froggy's mouth opened extra wide. He kept looking back and forth between the twins and the fairy godmother. I... He started, but couldn't finish. The fairy godmother waved her wand, and the curse cast upon him blew away like dandelion seeds in the wind. Froggy wasn't Froggy anymore. He was a man. He was a very attractive man, too, with dark hair and eyes that illuminated the entire room. It was shocking for the twins to see him as anything else. "Charlie?" King Chance said. "Is that you?" The charming brothers all leaned closer to him. They stared at him as if they were looking at a ghost. "Hello, brother," Froggy said. "It's been a long time." The Charming's amazement eventually wore off and turned into celebration. They ran over to their long-lost brother and vigorously embraced him. The room erupted with joy at the long-overdue reunion. Red Riding Hood was quietly blushing to herself. She was looking at Prince Charlie in a completely new way. He wasn't the friendly frogman who'd saved her from the collapsing castle anymore. He was husband material. "We thought you were dead," Chandler said, rubbing his brother's head. "We searched every kingdom for you," Chase said, patting him on the back. "Now you know why you couldn't find me," Charlie said, and shrugged. "Why didn't you tell us?" Chance asked. "I was ashamed," Charlie said. "I didn't know any better. I thought I had to hide. Please forgive me." The twins couldn't believe it. Now they knew why he'd been acting so strange when they had arrived. "So you're a prince?" Alex asked with a gigantic smile on her face. "You forgot to mention that part." "My apologies," Charlie said. "I could have sworn I mentioned it over lily pad tea." They laughed together. Charlie ran over the twins and hugged them almost as tightly as his brothers had just hugged him. "Thank you," Charlie said, "for inspiring me to come out of that hole in the ground." "Thank you," Alex said. "I'm still calling you Froggy," Connor said. The fairy godmother waved her crystal wand one last time, and a door appeared in the middle of the ballroom. She walked over to the twins and placed a hand on both their shoulders. "It's time," she said. The twins recognized the door immediately. It was the front door of their rental house. They had never been so happy to see it. A light was shining through it. They knew their mother was waiting for them on the other side. All the kings, queens, and fairies in the room looked at Alex and Connor sweetly. Although most of them had had their predicaments with the twins, they were sad to see them go. "Say goodbye," Grandma told the twins. Connor couldn't wait any longer and ran straight to the door. "Bye!" Connor yelled at everyone in the room without looking at them. He ran through the door and disappeared, home at last. Alex looked up at her grandmother. "Will we ever come back?" she asked, hoping with all her heart for the answer she wanted to hear. "Someday," her grandma said. Alex took a step toward the men and women she had grown up reading about her entire life. She could have sworn she had a dream just like this once. She had been meaning to say something and decided this might be her last chance to say it. "I know this might not make any sense, but thank you for always being there for me," Alex said. "You're the best friends I ever had." They didn't quite understand what she meant, but they were all very touched by her kind words. "Come along, dear," her grandma said, and escorted her to the door. Alex wiped away the tears that had been brought on by saying farewell. She couldn't help but smile as she walked through the door with her grandmother, because she knew in her heart it wasn't really goodbye. That's that. The end of the first book of the Land of Stories. I liked it. I hope you liked it too. I am very glad that my friend suggested that book, and I think if people are interested, then there are more in the series that we can read some point in the future. But for now, we're going to park it right here, take a break for maybe a week or two while I scrounge up the next book. In the meantime, I want to share something with you quickly that will come up again in another video, but for now, you get to hear about it first because you made it all the way to the end. You've probably noticed that newer videos, these videos that are coming out right now, don't have any comments enabled. That's because YouTube changed their rules and they have to be turned off now because the stories we read here are meant for children. And YouTube has rules about what can be turned on and turned off for videos, I guess, that are meant for children. So I miss having the comments. I miss you being able to tell me what you liked and what you didn't like, and suggest books and ask questions. And since that has to be off now, we're going to try something different. I am going to, well, actually, I have already, get something called a P.O. box. It's a mail thing that will let you send mail to me. Real mail with like a stamp on it. You put in a mailbox, not like that email stuff. And what it means is that if you want to suggest a book or ask a question or send me a cool drawing or something like that, that you can do that. And I'm going to put somewhere on the screen right here, maybe right here. This is the address that you can send it to. You'll need to get some help from your parents to put a stamp on like a postcard or something like that. Has to be fairly small. It's not I don't have a big mailbox. It's a fairly small mailbox. So like a postcard or a birthday card size type thing, that is totally fine. You can draw on it, write on it, ask questions on it, anything you want. Send it to this right here, and I will begin each video by reading something that somebody has sent so that we can still have like a little back and forth. You can still talk to me, I can still talk to you. And if you draw me something cool, I will put it up here on my wall of art, which right now only has this thing that my brother gave me. So it's kind of lonely. It needs more art. So if you send a postcard with a cool drawing on it and a question on the back, I will read that question, answer it right here, and then I will stick your drawing right up there until the whole wall is full, and then we'll have to take them all down and start again. So give that some thought. If you have something in mind, a book that you'd like to read here on the channel, or a question you want to ask, or a suggestion, or if you just want to tell me that my haircut's funny or something like that, go right ahead. I'll read it right here, and then we can take it from there. So that's that. Be back here in a couple weeks for a little update video and the next book. And until then, thanks for sticking around to the end. Yeah, it's definitely that time, because it's gotten late. I've gotten tired. So I'm going to get some sleep. Good night.